Beloved family and friends, we are here today because someone we love and respect and whose presence we've enjoyed has died. We are here to remember the life of Edward George Miller, a celebration of life of Ed. This is a moment to be real. Allow your emotions to flow. They honor the impact that Ed has had on you, on all of us. Allow your sadness to have its moments and your laughter to shake your body. We will listen together as stories are shared, and you will be surprised at some things you will hear and not surprised at all. Even in our grief, we marvel at the full, smart, delighted, kind life that Ed lived. Psalm 121 offers these opening words of comfort. I lift up my eyes to the hills. From where will my help come? My help comes from the Lord who made heaven and earth. You have come here, and you bring your words and beliefs that comfort you. Draw on and rest in that which gives you peace. Please pray with me. O God of wonder, we are this moment without one we love so dearly. We are without Ed, who has taught us, who has shown us the world, who has lived an ethic that celebrates life in all of life's variety. We hold Martha in your care. We hold Martha in our care as she feels the absence of Ed in her heart and in her daily living. We seek peace within the loss and joy within the remembering. May this day be a moment that lives on within us, within the vast echoes of the universe, within the comfort of sacred mystery. Amen.
You dwell in the shelter of the Lord, who abide in God's shadow for life. Say to the Lord, my refuge, my rock in whom I trust, and I will raise you up on eagle's wings. Bear you on the breath of dawn, make you to shine like the sun, and hold you in the palm of my hand. The snare of the fowler will never capture you, and famine will bring you no fear. Under God's wings your refuge, God's faithfulness your shield. And I will raise you up on eagle's wings, bear you on the breath of dawn, make you to shine like the sun, and hold you in the palm of my hand. You need not fear the terror shine like the sun, and hold you in the palm of my hand. For to the angels God's given a command to guard you in all of your ways. Upon their hands they will bear you up, lest you dash your foot against a stone. And I will raise you up on eagle's wings, bear you on the breath of dawn, make you to shine like the sun, and hold you in the palm of my hand. And hold you in the palm of my hand.
Welcome, everyone. On behalf of Ed Miller's family, we are grateful for all who are able to join us today, in person or virtually, for the celebration of a life well lived. It's really hard to sum up in a few minutes or to fully distinguish Ed's impact separately from Martha's. Allow me to share a bit about Ed as our family saw him, someone with an adventurous spirit, a scientist, teacher, and puzzle solver who had a sharp memory, a quiet wit, and a great appreciation and concern for the world and the people in it. Much of the adventure we experienced as a family can be traced back to an experience right after Ed graduated from college. These are his words, written for a Manchester College convocation focusing on study abroad programs, where one of his points was, if you don't want your life changed in dramatic, unforeseen, and surprising ways, then don't travel abroad. He said, when I graduated from Manchester College in 1956, there was neither a January term nor a Brethren College Abroad program. Almost none of us had been overseas, but that summer, my future wife and I participated in an international work camp just north of Quito, Ecuador. For 6 weeks, we helped in the construction of a community building. We lived in a school, sleeping on wooden cots in a classroom, using a pit latrine, and preparing meals of locally available produce. We met Jaime, a skilled carpenter and cabinet maker, talented musician, and creative artist with whom we remain in touch. We traveled in the back of a pickup truck over cobblestone and dirt roads, up high mountain passes, and down into the Amazon headwaters. In Otavalo, we marveled at the skill of artisans who created colorful fabrics using hand-spun woolen yarns on backstrap looms. Others displayed intricate silver jewelry. It's impossible to know how much this trip changed our lives. Without this background, we would never later have taken our children, ages 8 and 11, to the Central Philippines for a year and then traveled 3 months through Asia and on around the world on our own itinerary. When Mike and I were growing up, our family vacations were travels to various interest points in the United States, sometimes on the way to something, Ed's sabbatical in Princeton, summer research at Berkeley. We primitive camped across the United States or stayed closer to home at state parks and sometimes camping with other faculty who had young families. Wherever we went, we explored the local natural features, arts and crafts, history or culture, and we often stopped to visit distant relatives or acquaintances. We learned about rocks and fossils and birds and plants. Our world, near or far, was made up of places to explore and learn about. I remember camping in our large light green canvas tent, pitched with aluminum poles, big enough to stand up inside. When it rained, and it did, we had some really big storms sometimes, we had to move away from the edges to make sure our sleeping bags and gear didn't touch the wall of the tent, or else the water would wick in. When it was time to leave, there was a process for folding and flattening the tent in a particular way, so it was always the same size to stow. Dad built a camping cupboard with a swing down front that made workspace, and then there were cubbies to organize and hold all the cooking gear and some of the food. Packing the car was a science and an art. Everything was neatly placed, accessible, fitting just right, like completing a giant 3D jigsaw puzzle. We were always impressed by Dad's trip planning and his ability to stay cool as a cucumber when things didn't go quite right. He would just redirect and roll with the changes. Trip planning, too, was a kind of puzzle Dad didn't mind solving. When Mike says he got his adventure gene from Dad, he remembers when Dad took him rafting in Utah. Dad got pulled out of the raft in some really rough rapids by the woman sitting next to him, who had grabbed him in a panic as the front of the boat went vertical and nearly tipped over backwards. Dad laughed and joked about it after getting rescued and pulled back in. Then on their turbulent flight back to Moab in a tiny plane, Dad was excitedly looking out of the window, pointing out landmarks on the river below where they had hiked or camped. Meanwhile, Mike remembers turning 3 shades of green, looking straight ahead and trying to block out the air sickness from materializing. Dad fully participated in parenting. He played games with us, taught us songs and Spanish words, made us laugh when he imitated the sounds of cows or garbage trucks, including us in his projects around the house, and always encouraged us to try new things. I remember playing on the floor of Dad's office in Hole-Kintner Science Building when he had childcare duties. He let me play with the chemical bond models he used in his classes. They were kind of like giant tinker toys to me. Unfortunately, this did not produce in me a love of organic chemistry when I got to college. OChem felt like a lot of memorization. Mike never really liked organic chemistry either. We're sorry, Dad. Neither of us wanted to embarrass ourselves as students when he was the only prof who taught organic. I actually took the class pass-fail so I wouldn't have the pressure of a grade. He was a good teacher, though, and we both passed. Dad's memory was incredible. Maybe this is why organic chem was a good fit for him. He was an encyclopedia with an instant recall of people, places, and dates. Neither of us inherited much of that ability. He and Mom were a lethal team when it came to crossword puzzles. Since cooking is really just applied chemistry, it's no surprise that Dad wasn't a slouch in the kitchen. He made bread and hummus and various hearty soups. He often chopped the onion and garlic for Mom's creations. And they made a lot of chocolate bark and homemade applesauce together. His butternut squash casserole and African peanut soup were favorites of mine. Mike liked Dad's grape pie, made from grapes off the vines in their backyard. Dad was always excited to see new places, meet new people, and make new friends. Neither of us, Mike or I, can imagine taking little kids abroad for a trip around the world like our parents did for his Philippines sabbatical, especially in an age before cell phones and internet. We visited something like 17 countries during those 15 months and had around 60 plane flights, plus a VW camper excursion through Europe, then sailed back to the US across the Atlantic Ocean on the SS France. Through these experiences abroad and in the US, our Dad and Mom team demonstrated to us how to treat others kindly and with respect, opened our eyes to the uniqueness and beauty of other cultures and perspectives, and helped us appreciate the many ways we humans are all the same.
Hi, I'm Carly Miller.
And I'm Zach Miller.
Ed got to experience many roles in his life, and to all of you. He was a dad, husband, brother, teacher, friend, and so much more. To us, he was our Grandpa Miller. You might know me as his only granddaughter.
And his only grandson.
But if you asked him, I was his favorite granddaughter.
And his favorite grandson.
Sorry. Lack of competition aside, thanks Michelle and Steve, my grandpa not only loved us, but he truly liked us. And I think that's because of how much we take after him. If all he had given us was his DNA, we'd be incredibly lucky, but he blessed us with so much more than his good looks. He gave us so many pieces of himself, including his kindness, sense of adventure, humor, thirst for knowledge, and his wonderful smile.
We are very grateful to have experienced so many amazing adventures with him throughout our lives. Some of our favorites include traveling to Belize, Alaska, Catalina Island, and most recently a 2-week trip to Portugal. At 91 years old, my grandpa took us all the way to Europe to experience a river cruise through the Douro River and even a day in Spain. His capacity to walk and explore each day of that trip just a few months ago, last year, will forever be an inspiration to us. Arguably even more impressive was in 2020 at the age of 86 when he took me on his medical practicum, and we slept on the concrete for 2 weeks straight, and he complained less than I did. And we are blessed to have shared such rich experiences with him throughout his life.
It's difficult to talk about my grandpa without including the person he chose to build his life with, my grandma. They were a team for over 70 years of their life and demonstrated to us what true unwavering partnership looks like through their many travels and everyday lives. They lived a life that, in my grandpa's very own words, couldn't have been better. They made it a point to not only share it with the people they love, but also care for those in need around the world. They both inspired us to follow career paths in public service as a speech pathologist and a social worker. Their love is something we will look up to for the rest of our lives. So we want to say thank you to them for living such full, caring, and courageous lives so that we can follow in their footsteps and carry on that legacy.
I'll close by sharing a bit of Dad's wit. Dad scheduled back surgery in Ohio with a specialist who was an MU alum, and he didn't tell anyone outside of the family. Later, someone from the church community asked him why he hadn't let anyone know he was having surgery so he could be in their prayers. Always the scientist, he said, "I wanted to see if I could heal without prayer." Dad's wit remained intact and his memory sharp even in his last weeks. At his room in Timbercrest Healthcare, after a healthcare quarantine was lifted, Martha told him, "Yesterday they took the quarantine sign down from your door." Ed, "Does that mean I'll have more visitors?" "If I don't want more visitors, can you put the sign back up?" Another time, Martha filled his water cup from the faucet in the room. Ed said, "It's cold." Martha, "It's not ice water." Ed, without skipping a beat, "It's not a fly swatter?" And they both burst out laughing. He had spontaneously unearthed a long ago incident at a restaurant when a waiter had said he would bring ice waters to the table, and Dad had misheard the waiter and asked, "Why is he bringing us fly swatters?" Dad was grateful for his life, his family, his friends, and his opportunities. In January, after they learned his cancer was terminal, Martha said to him, "We've had a great life." And he answered, "It couldn't have been better."
Good afternoon. My name is Sam Reichenbach, and I mowed Ed's lawn in the summer. If I should ever leave you, whom I love, to go along the silent way, grieve not. Nor speak of me with tears, but laugh and talk. Talk of me as if I were beside you there. I'd come could I but find a way. But would not tears and grief be barriers? And when you hear a song or see a bird I loved, please do not let the thought of me be sad. For I am loving you just as I always have. You were so good to me. There are so many things I wanted still to do, so many things to say to you. Remember that I did not fear. It was just leaving you that was so hard to face. We cannot see beyond, but this I know. I loved you so. 'Twas heaven here with you.
When Martha asked me if I would say a few words today about Ed, I said, certainly. Later, I had realized that I had known Ed for 5.5 decades. And it was unrealistic to talk about him over that long time. Over the years, Ed Wilson Lutz, and I, Jim Streeter, were the chemistry department at Manchester College. We were joined for a period of high enrollment by Stan Weller. I decided to focus on the 25 years since the three of us, Ed Wilson and I, retired. And that's what I'm going to talk about. He didn't do things like they're talking about up here, but he lived. Additionally, it turns out that for the three of us and our spouses, we all taught at one time or another at Manchester College. That's not a mistake. It was the college. And we all knew each other. And we weren't going to let that pass. And we didn't. So we've had fun for 25 years. Not crawling around in the mountains or in the streams or in the hills or wherever, but sitting and talking. Another similarity that led us to be together was that the Millers and the Lutzes were dyed-in-the-wool brethren. Actually, I should probably say dyed-in-the-polyester brethren. And Carol had been choir director at the church for 15 plus years. I guess I was a heretic in the group, but brethren are quite tolerant. Well, most of them. I quickly found that I also had a problem, which is what those already talked about. During the time I was going to cover, it was difficult for me to separate activities of the Millers into those of Ed and those of Martha, since they did so many things together. So I decided not to separate them. The six of us, Ed, Wilson, and myself, and our spouses, agreed to meet, I'll skip over details, every other Wednesday. Our original meeting place was the current Travel Bee location downtown, which many of you know about. That was pretty good because we knew the people who ran it. We would sit there and talk, and you'd be surprised how many of you came in and said, oh, hi, blah, 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 blah. So we had a good time when we did that. If I don't watch where I'm going, I'll go all over the place. Be like the president. Then after the old science building had been renovated, we found we had another meeting place. a casual meeting place complete with a conveniently large coffee table and 6 comfortable chairs and a cafe, the sisters. Looked like it was built just for us. And so on Wednesdays when we met, we took advantage of it. And we met there very frequently. You may say, what the heck if 6 old fogey guys have to talk about? A lot of things. And you'd be surprised how many of those things included some of you. And we weren't gossiping. No, that's the truth. We weren't. We were just bringing history up. We talked about current events. We all sort of kept up on current events, so we had no problem with that. And local situations, about the many trips that, especially those taken by the Millers. And during that time, some of us took trips too. All 6 of us tripped around. Ed was especially good at remembering events, as has been pointed out. And Martha was good at adding any omissions or correcting his mistakes. As time progressed, Wilson had some health problems, so we changed our venue and met in warm weather on the front porch of the Lutzes. Miller's brought the necessary caffeine, and we enjoyed some nice conversations. And then the inevitable started to happen. I mean, we were in our 80s, 90s, and you all know what happens then. My wife died of complications. Due to lung cancer. Sold our house. We lived north of here. And moved into an apartment at Timbercrest. The Lutzes also moved into a Timbercrest apartment so Wilson could be handled through health care. He had been progressively worse health. Shortly after that, Wilson died. The remaining 4 of us decided on a new tack. I mean, we're not going to give up. The worst thing you can do when you get that old and something happens is give up, because you will go very fast. Ed and Martha would bring the coffee, and we would meet alternately at Mary's and my apartments. This worked well for quite some time, and we had a lot of fun. While we were all alive, we decided that we would have a Christmas meeting. Our married children who were scattered around the country each had 2 families to visit at Christmas time, since this typically meant that we had no Christmas visitors. We decided to be our own internal Santa Clauses. Our house was ideal for us to meet at for dinner, with each couple contributing some food. Carol had a delicious salmon dish, and the Millers and the Lutzes had equally delicious supporting dishes. I know the salmon was good because Wilson actually asked for a second serving once, which was unusual for him. In the Christmas of 2025, the 4 of us who remained decided to have a Christmas dinner in remembrance of the years gone by. I'm not totally clear on this, but I think my recollection, excuse me, I also have a drippy nose. My recollection is that the Millers suggested we do this. So the Millers, Mary Lutz, who was here, and I got together at Timbercrest. I brought my eldest son, and we invited a Timbercrest resident who we all knew and liked, but was never married, had no family around here to spend Christmas with, so she'd have a blank Christmas. So I gave us 6. So we had Christmas meal at Timbercrest, and it was enjoyable. Ed's comment to me after the dinner was that we should do this again next year. That was said on December 25th, and Ed died on February 8th. So we come to the end. Ed's book of life has no more chapters. But I remind Martha hopefully, that she has many friends, and they all will be willing to help her write her current chapter of her book of life. But to her husband, Rick Wisconsin Pache, rest in peace, Ed.
When I think of Ed Miller, I do think of his titles and accomplishments, and there were many. But what comes to mind first is him showing up in my office doorway at Manchester College/University. While he usually had someplace to go next and he needed to keep moving on, he had this way of appearing in my doorway, sometimes with a question, sometimes with an idea, sometimes with something he'd come across in his files. And before long, we were deep in a conversation about a possibility, about something most likely worth the effort. And that was one of his gifts. He could see what something might become, and then he invited people into it. The medical practicum is one of the clearest examples. What began in 1981 with 8 students became something that has reached tens of thousands of patients and shaped generations of Manchester students. But Ed didn't measure it mainly by the numbers. Rather, he paid attention to the people. To the students who found direction, to the professionals who gave their time and expertise, to the communities that welcomed us, and to the relationships that grew out of it all. I especially remember one moment in Nicaragua in the Rio Coco. We had been in dugout canoes for, 5 or 6 hours, probably about halfway through that day's journey on the river. Most of us, including me, were worn out, trying to doze, stretch out on bags, just trying to get comfortable. And I remember looking back. I was in one of the front canoes, and I looked back, and there was Ed sitting upright, like perfect posture, with calm, bright eyes, just taking everything in. And I remember that feeling at that time just struck me of being buoyed by his, being supported by his aware, insightful, calm, strong, gentle presence. And that's how he was on those boats, but really all the time. Ed often said, or repeated something he'd heard, adventure is discomfort in retrospect. And if you've been part of the medical practicum, or I imagine other adventures with Ed, you probably know how true that is. I think he understood something important, which is that growth, service, connection often begin just outside our comfort zone. On a personal level, I owe Ed more than I can fully express. I came to Manchester too late to be his student, but not too late to be shaped by his mentorship. he nudged me gently but persistently into, among other things, leading the medical practicum. He kept showing up, asking questions, sharing ideas, making observations. More than building programs, he developed people. And what he started continues in the students who go on to serve, in the communities still being reached, and in all of us who were changed by knowing him. I miss him, and I will always be grateful for his encouragement, for his example, and for the many adventures that he made possible.
We feel honored to be asked to speak about Ed. Ed and Martha have been part of our lives for over 50 years. Way back when we were newly married and in the Philippines, and there they came. We also shared stories about Japan. We were in Ecuador together. So you noticed in the photos all of the places they have been. There's something else that I noticed in those pictures, and that was how bright and alert were Ed's eyes. And I decided that I wanted to focus on how resilient Ed was. Zach, we were in the same medical practicum together. And I had the same observation about your grandpa. Getting up and down on the cement, dirty floors to sleep, using the outhouse, and he was in his 80s. So I just was amazed. Some of you have mentioned his memory also. That is astounding. But I want to turn it over to Joel to tell you a personal story.
My name is Joel. Ed, I'm a retired physician, and Ed pestered me for years to join the medical practicum. But it takes 3 weeks of time out. So I didn't go until I retired, by which time he had retired. So I went on the medical practicum, but under Jeff's tutelage. Ed really loved, or seemed to love, adventure, and many of those he shared with his wife. And the medical practicum was definitely one of those adventures over and over and over and over and over again, because every one of them was different. Bev's mentioned one, and others have. I remember one when we went down to Nicaragua, and we flew into Managua, and our trip involved an almost full day of a ride in a refurbished U.S. school bus to get to the town where we were going to get in the dugout canoes and go downstream. Unfortunately, the bus broke its drive shaft about 2 hours from where we were going to go, give or take. This was not the first time there had been problems on the medical practicum. And so we were stuck. We weren't going anywhere. A couple hours, an hour and a half later, a couple of large multi-axle, multi-drive trucks came out from the town and picked us up. We were on dirt roads, and so we headed back. And half an hour into it, we got to a place where there was a bit of flooding, a lot of rain, and we went into a mud pie. Ed and I happened to be seated in the back of a truck just looking over the tailgate, and we could see the places where the tires of the truck were digging in, leaving ruts that are 8 or 10 or 12 inches deep, and the truck was swaying back and forth. I pointed out to Ed as we looked out that this was really interesting, but it sure was a mess. And he said, well, people have asked me why I do this. I mean, after all, he didn't have the comforts of home, to put it mildly. There was always something going wrong, to put it mildly, and it was exhausting, even for those of us who are much younger. I can just see the people out here who have been on this trip nodding for that. And his response was, I just love it.
tree. In cocoons a hidden promise, butterflies will soon be free. In the cold and snow of winter, there's a spring that waits to be unrevealed until its season, something God alone can see. There's a song in every silence, seeking word and melody. There's a dawn in every darkness, bringing hope to you and me. From the past will come the future, what it holds a mystery, unrevealed until its season, something God alone can see. In our end is our beginning, in our time infinity. In our doubts there is believing, in our life eternity. In our death a resurrection, at the last a victory, unrevealed until its season, something God alone can see.
Good afternoon. I know so many of you, but for those of you who don't know me, I teach chemistry at Carroll College in Helena, Montana. But 40 years ago, as Dr. Miller's student at Manchester, I was a very different kind of chemist. I was more interested, yeah, you know all about it, Mark. I was more interested in weekend distractions than in distillation. In organic chemistry, I was so convinced that I'd bombed Dr. Miller's exams that I refused to sign my own name, handing them in as benzene, aldehyde. Now, you might think that I'm just making that up, but a couple of years ago, Martha can vouch for this. I was at church and I was talking to Ed and Martha, and with the sharp memory that Michelle and that Jeff Osborne mentioned, he recalled specifically those funny names. I still have a general chemistry exam from Dr. Miller's class where I scored 70% in acid-base chemistry. It's poetic or ironic, actually, because that subject is now my highest area of expertise. Dr. Miller, and let's see, what was I going to say? I meant to say I've showed this exam where I scored the 70% to many, many students who are struggling. Dr. Miller didn't just tolerate my humor. He saw through the persona. He saw a scientist in a class clown. And even after I accidentally lit my girlfriend's dorm room on fire with unauthorized stockroom chemicals, evacuating Garver Hall and summoning the North Manchester Fire Department, Dr. Miller didn't give up on me. When I graduated, Dr. Miller became Ed, and he told me, to my surprise, that I should attend graduate school. When I applied for various master's programs, he stopped me and said, no, you need to be in the PhD program. Ed possessed a rare, unique gift. He saw a capacity in his students that we hadn't yet discovered in ourselves. As Jeff Osborne just said, he could see what people could become. More than building programs, he developed people. He looked past my academic underperformance and my lack of self-confidence to see the professor that I would become. and he did this for hundreds of us. Because of this, I've spent 28 years in a career I love. So, the true Ed Miller legacy is this. When I see a student who's acting out because they're bored or struggling with no self-confidence, I don't see a problem. I see myself in Ed's 1985 organic chemistry lab. Every time I tell a student they have what it takes, I am channeling Ed. Ed, thank you for looking past the fake names and the fire to see my potential. I'll keep looking for benzenes in my classroom, just like you did for me.
I don't know what your destiny will be, but one thing I know, the only ones among you who will be truly happy are those who have learned to serve. Martha gave that to us on every one of our trips for whatever part of Central America we were in. And I carry that with me on my mission trips. I give it to my medical students and the rest of the doctors on those trips. Kyle, you had this right on the nose. First time I really talked to Dr. Miller, I was in organic chemistry, and I made an appointment in his office to have a talk with him about a couple of questions on a midterm exam. And I was worried I wasn't doing very well in the class. And Ed said, "Why do you care about a couple of points?" And I said, "Well, Dr. Miller, it could be a half a grade. I want to apply to dental school. I need to get the highest grades possible." He looked at me and he goes, "That's ridiculous. You're a great student. What are you worried about?" I said, "You don't understand." Well, I now understand. He saw something in me and he knew there was nothing to worry about. So I did go through dental school. Ed had gone through, at that point, he had told me that, "What's your family like?" And I said, "Well, love my parents, great family. My brother's here, my sister's coming." And he said, "Well, what are your parents really like?" And I said, "Well, they're active in the church or active in the school." And he goes, "They give back, right?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, I'll tell you what. You need to go on Dr. Zimmerman's trip. He's going to Guatemala. I think you'd fit into that trip beautifully." I said, "Okay, I'll look at that." And he goes, "And by the way, I'm thinking about putting my own trip together, and I'd like to go to Central America, and I'd like to take doctors and students along." I said, "Well, that's really interesting." And he goes, "Maybe there'll be a place for a dentist someday." This was in '76. Well, ultimately, I did graduate from dental school. And Ed called me and he said, "Mike, I think he had gone to Honduras, Guatemala, and I think there was another, I don't think it was Nicaragua. What were the first three trips, Martha?" Oh, yeah. And so he was in the Dominican Republic, and he said in Villahama, and he said, "I'd like you to go along because I'd like to expand the dental part of it. I took a dentist last year. I'm going back, and I'd like you to go along, and I want to have 2 dentists on this one." I said, "Wow, that sounds great. I think I could offer something to that trip, and we could maybe develop the dental part of it a little bit more." And so we got there. It was a great trip. And one day he said, "You know what, I'd like to take you down off the mountain and down into the city, and we can go to the hospital. You want to see how a third world hospital works." And he'd already been there. So we went down by a truck, and toured the hospital, eye-opening experience, kind of like Dr. Zimmerman's trip to Guatemala, all new to me at that point. And on the way back, you guys all know what happens, the truck broke down. So we were stranded on the side of a really dirt road going up the mountain. So at that point I said, well, Ed, I guess we're gonna be sitting for a while. What are your hopes and aspirations since you did this to me years ago? And he said, he talked about his family and Martha and how he wanted to expand the practicum. And he told me his vision was that the students would become doctors, the doctors would continue these trips, and the healthcare people involved would be trained after we left, and that not just the practicum would be the basis, but people going all over the world, for the doctors moving on to other trips, to other places, and basically to serve the underserved. Wow. That dirty road was my road to Damascus. It was a point in my life when I decided I was going to do that for the rest of my life, both professionally and personally. That was a huge moment with Ed. Sorry. But from that moment on, I went with Ed and Martha on a number of trips. We went everywhere. We had all kinds of adventures, very, very successful trips. He was a great crisis manager. It didn't matter if it was spiders and tarantulas in bed, in a knapsack. It could also be the blood and the flies we were covered with after a hot day in clinic. It could be the earthquake we were in on one trip. It could be the arrest and deportation on another trip where we got up at 3 in the morning and beat the police out into the rainforest. He never lacked for adventure. And after every one of them, he said, wow, Mike, what an adventure. And with that, on my trips other places, I have made sure I've taken all 3 of my boys when they were young men, still in grade school, so they could see what it was like to be in a third world nation. And I think they're all better for it. I think in my mind, Ed was an instrument of peace in the service of our Lord. He was my mentor and my friend. And I think the greatest gift that Ed ever gave me was he made me a better man. And Martha, I think Ed's presence was compelling. I think his absence will be deafening. And I think his legacy will be everlasting. Just remember that. Thank you.
If you want to see an example of Ed's mentorship, it's here. And it didn't always come directly from Ed. It comes through others, through Kyle, through Mike, through so many of you who Ed worked with and Ed mentored. I was thinking about the mentorship that I got from Ed. And on these different trips too, these medical practicum trips, Ed and Martha. And I see a lot of mentorship that comes through the words, wise words people can give us, and those are wonderful, and from really caring, compassionate, brave actions. Ed did both. He lived his life that way, and that was just amazing. But I think about his strength and persistence and faith, and I think about the trip that Joel talked about in 2018 when we had gone on that long dugout canoe trip, like 10 or 11 hours on that thing. And the next morning, sleeping on the concrete floor with a little thin pad, and we're all sort of piled around on the floor, laid out, and Dr. Steve Hendricks next to me, and I think it was Eric Reichenbach was on the other side. Anyway, about 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, we hear a sound. We're like, what is that? We didn't know if someone was in there. Here's Ed. He's up. He's stretching. He's got his resistance bands. This was a few months after his back surgery. He's up working out, and the sun wasn't even up yet. And we're all like, you know, talking about, oh, we're getting old. We can't do this. I think he would have been 83 at the time, you know, and it was just like, okay, I can do this, you know, and it was just, and he wasn't complaining. He always had a smile. I remember I sat up and looked, you know, and he kind of looked over, that grin, you know, and he just kept going, and that was just wonderful. And so, well, I'll always remember of Ed, and actually many of you in this room, but the ideals of mentorship and guidance really, really came through. He really embodied the faith learning service motto of the school, and it was in his life, and just the beautiful, wonderful life that he lived will always be an inspiration to so many of us. And thank all of you, and we'll be thinking of you.
It occurred to me recently that I could look at what Martha and Ed mean to me by looking at what I would be missing, what would be different in my life if it weren't for knowing and having gone on Jan term trips with them. Wow, a lot of things would be different. The shared experience that Mark and I had helped to strengthen our relationship. It helped us shape our careers in medicine and dentistry. It showed me the world from a whole different perspective for the first time. But I think the biggest thing that it did was the relationships that we've gained. If you're like us, you can make a mental list of people who are in your lives that wouldn't be if you hadn't known Ed and Martha and maybe gone on one of their trips or through other ways. For me, some of those friends are like family. I want to point out, in particular, Camilo, who's here. Camilo was a student from Managua who was one of the many students that came along on the trips from the host country to interpret. And Camilo has been an incredible part of our lives ever since he and Mark struck up a friendship in Nicaragua. Camilo, his wife Adriana, they're adorable kids, Sophia and little Felipe. Adriana's parents, they all live near us now, which is just so amazing. In addition, Camilo's sister Laura was also an interpreter and also graduated from Manchester College, like Camilo did. She is with us online today from Minneapolis, and their mother, Sandra, worked with Ed to plan the trips, help them go smoothly, well, you know, relatively speaking. And Sandra's with us today online from Nicaragua. Shout out to you, I love you. It strikes me that the network of loving relationships built from Ed's and Martha's life work encompasses the entire globe. Thank you, Martha. Thank you, Ed. You've made our lives so much richer.
Quise vivimos, para Dios vivimos, y si morimos, para Dios morimos, sea que vivamos o que moramos, somos del buen Dios, somos del buen Dios, pues vivimos, para Dios vivimos, y si morimos, para Dios morimos, sea que vivamos o que moramos, somos del buen Dios, somos del buen Dios. Sea que vivamos o que moramos, somos del buen Dios, somos del buen Dios, somos del buen Dios, somos del buen Dios.
We have heard such wonderful, wonderful stories, so specific to the friendships and everything that you have experienced. You are now welcome to briefly share a particular story, or share an appreciation, or sit in the waiting silence full of your memories, so precious and so funny. Ed was funny and marvelous. Know that there is also time after the service during the visitation to continue sharing and listening. So there are 2 microphones on the floor, one here and one there. Just come up and take your turn, and we will hear your stories.
I speak from 25 years as dean at the college. And I want to thank Kyle for solving the last remaining mystery of the burning classroom. My perspective on the college, the university, any college or any university, from the student perspective is maybe slightly different. But I've come to realize that the quality of a university really rests with a small handful of college, of faculty who take the classroom, the textbook, and convert it into human terms, and thus changing the student. And you've heard the effect of this from all these missionary trips and so forth. But just simply living and seeing it applied, even whether it's science or whether in my field, psychology, you see a change. And that's, to me, that's where the quality of any college or university rests. And I really thank you, all you professors that are here.
My name is Dick Robbins, and I grew up in North Manchester from a family where neither of my parents graduated from high school. Ed, I was sitting with my wife, live in Cleveland, Ohio. We drove over, and I said, Ed passed away, and I have to be there. And she asked me to think about it and what it was that was so important. And Ed was the most important man in my life. And I tried to think, what's the quintessence of Ed? How do I capture this? And what I came up with is that he was a Renaissance man who transformed lives, including mine. And as I hear many of you talk, he's transformed your lives. And Ed isn't gone. He hasn't gone because he's there through every one of us. And I always admired, I always told Martha, yeah, I wished I could find someone like you, and unfortunately I did. But she was the wind under his wings that helped lift him up. And I've always been grateful for the support that has come. I was one of his first organic chemistry students. And he took to me like I took to organic chemistry. And he encouraged me, he got me an undergraduate research grant, NSF grant at Ohio State between the junior and senior year. Didn't have any money, didn't know how I was gonna finish my senior year, etc. But he was always encouraging, and he was always there. I played football and baseball, he was always there at the games, even though we didn't win many games like now, in football especially. But he was very, very present. He was just omnipresent. And he continues to be omnipresent, and he continues to transform lives. So all I can say is if there's a life well lived, I can't imagine it being better than Ed Miller's. And I guess there's nothing else I can really say to that.
Zimmerman, and I was a Manchester College kid, grew up in this community, and Ed believed in me. When I got rejected from medical school, he said, we're gonna try again. I want you to look at osteopathic medical school. So just like all of you, just like Elaine said, he believed in me, and I am who I am because of him. And later, not only is he a mentor, but he's a friend. I'd like to see how many people went on a medical practicum, or if not a medical practicum, maybe had him in class. Could you just stand so that we can see his presence? Thank you, Ed and Martha.
Hello, it's a distinct honor to be here and thank all of you. I came here a few years ago, and I was like Jeff Osborne, I was not fortunate to be in chemistry, a student of his, but I was a colleague when he graduated from Manchester the second time, AKA when he retired. And so when I came here to Manchester, Indiana, at first I thought, okay, the closest thing to Manchester is Michigan, where my brother also went to DO school, but I didn't really know much. I originally came from Germany, and then Arizona, and then here. And I felt extremely welcome when I met Ed and Martha. Martha and Ed really helped make this place a wonderful home for me in many ways. And we had wonderful exchanges, always gee whiz, and always in awe and the open eyes. And I was there when he retired at the retirement party, and I remember very distinct pieces, like he would count the steps that he took to go to and from work. I was also fortunate to see him in his last moments. I went to Timbercrest, and he was in his bed. He was very alert, and he said, I don't know what's going on. And then when I left, I said, I look forward to seeing you again. And he said, if I'm still here. Thank you.
I'm Shirley Glade, and Beata just mentioned something very important. I graduated in 1958 from Manchester College, 2 years after Ed and Martha graduated. And my highest compliment for anybody is that guy's a gee whiz person. And I always, that Ed was the top of the list of a gee whiz person. He was always open and sparkling. And I felt so blessed that Beata told me that Ed was in Timbercrest. And I went out to see him. We had a wonderful conversation talking about the people we knew from years ago, and also the fact that my husband had been his German teacher. And also, he still was sparkling, even though he was at that point going someplace else. So, and I also think that you, Martha, and Ed were so blessed to find each other, because you've been a terrific team. And I feel so blessed to have known you both.
Hi, my name is Jeff Easley. I am a graduate from Manchester College, 1983, and went to Panama with Dr. Miller in 1982. The story that I want to relate to you is one that I've spoken about before, but it involves Martha as well. Many of you have said the two of them are one and the same, and they really are, and they were. I remember it was near finals time during organic chemistry, and Dr. Miller invited us to his home on Sunday afternoon. And we got there, and Martha, being the consummate hostess, gave us cookies and all kinds of treats and hot apple cider, and we just had a wonderful time. And then Dr. Miller said, okay, everybody sit down on the floor, and he proceeded to quiz us about organic chemistry for the next hour. And then after that hour was up, he said, okay, I think you're ready. Time to go. Bye. And we were dismissed, and out we went. And but that's the kind of person that I remember, and an incredible influence that he had on my life in many of the other things that I did, and the trips that I took with Manchester and on my own with my own students. So thank you very much.
My name is Katie Brown, and I did not study chemistry. I have, however, for almost half of my life, been a neighbor to Ed and Martha, and their garden is on my commute. And so sometimes, as many as 6 times a day, I will pass by Ed and Martha's garden, which means the likelihood of encountering Ed was very high in all seasons. And sometimes that meant I needed to factor that into my commute time. It also meant, I remarked to my husband, that outside of my immediate family, Ed was maybe the person I saw most regularly. And while the gardens may be beautiful and the trees that we share will still be glorious, I will miss the simple delight of having that connection and his company in the world.
We hold these memories within us. I did not live the journey to other countries or the classroom or the family gatherings as you have, but I have heard some of the stories about some of you. Ed speaks of you, of Central America, of the world, of the medical practicum, of makeshift toilets, of classroom learning, of all that he had found so meaningful. I have witnessed through paying attention to him of what he witnessed with you. There is an alchemical light that beams from his whole face as he would tell a tale that transports the listener from here to there and more. Mostly, I have had the pleasure of welcoming Ed and Martha to church on Sundays. Looking for them to come in, they would greet me and many others with a hug, sharing concerns, expecting to connect with what matters most. In our last conversation together, a week before his death, Ed shared about his life. Just a reflection as he laid there flat on his back. It was such a good life, he said. He felt so lucky. He spoke of the things that made up his lucky and good life with deep satisfaction. And when he spoke of Martha, she was the singular wonder in his life, and he spoke with the deepest love and emotion. I will say that Ed was a man of faith, a faith not confined to religious definitions, a faith so enormous that it contains the heights and depths of mountains and lakes, a faith so insistent that it held on to hope for peace in this world, a faith so kind that you never wanted to leave where you were standing for just a moment with him. You all have brought a testimony to Ed's life. His lessons are embedded in your bones. His laughter now is on your breath, and every lesson begs to be lived in you in your own way. I believe that lessons of God and hope, lessons of science, chemistry, biology, lessons of the jungle speaking, lessons expressed in many languages by many people in many cultures, lessons of the heavens twinkling, have been known in the curious and wondering mind, heart, spirit, and presence of Ed Miller. And we carry that forward. For this, we are so deeply grateful. Before I bring a benediction, I will say that the family would love for you to stay a while to visit. There is a simple reception table out in the narthex of several of Ed's favorite desserts. You are all welcome to keep telling stories. Our benediction are the words of a poem written by Don Parker on February 7th, 2026 for Ed Miller, entitled A Final Act of Living. What is the meaning of death if not the final act of living? It is a well-chosen bow wrapping up the gift of life, a knot reuniting a worn-through string to send a kite soaring into the sky, laces to bind skates tight before gliding across smooth ice. The bow tied, the knot pulled, the laces tight. We lose our balance and lift our hands, finding the outstretched hands of God, like those of a beloved friend, lifting us up onto our feet to skate together as one, providing a wind that lifts the kite higher and higher into the sunlit sky, blessing the carefully tied ribbon that graces and enfolds a well-lived life. May we all be blessed by the life of Ed Miller.
My life flows on in endless song above its lamentations. I catch the sweet, though far off hymn that hails a new creation. No storm can shake my inmost calm, while to that rock I'm clinging. Since love is Lord of heaven and earth, how can I keep from singing? Through all the tumult and the strife, I hear that music ringing. It finds an echo in my soul. How can I keep from singing? No storm can shake my inmost calm, while to that rock I'm clinging. Since love is Lord of heaven and earth, how can I keep from singing? What though the joys and comforts die, the Lord my Savior liveth. What though the darkness gather round, songs in the night He giveth. No storm can shake my inmost calm, while to that rock I'm clinging. Since love is Lord of heaven and earth, how can I keep from singing? The peace of Christ makes fresh my heart, a fountain ever springing. All things are mine, you.